I never imagined my father's 65th birthday would unravel the way it did. 4 weeks I had been planning everything with meticulous care, from the menu to the playlist he loved from his youth, to the soft lighting strung across the backyard of our childhood home in Westlake, where the warm Austin breeze carried hints of fall even in late November. He had always been our anchor, our quiet force, and if anyone deserved to be celebrated, it was him. I wanted it to be perfect. But I didn't account for Haley. I never account for Haley, not really. She arrived nearly an hour late as expected, heels clicking sharply on the stone patio like a warning bell. She wore that blood-red dress that always felt like a statement, her hair twisted into a severe knot that made her look older than 26. She greeted our aunts and cousins with a theatrical smile, leaning in for air kisses, but her eyes, they never softened. Not even when she looked at me. So I tried. Always try. I handed her a glass of chilled rose, the kind she used to drink before she started claiming it gave her headaches. "Glad you made it," I said, voice light. "Dad's been asking for you." "Of course he has," she said flatly, brushing past me. I wouldn't miss the Mitchell family's annual display of forced affection. I let it go because that's what I do. I let Haley's barbs slide off me like rain on stone. It's been that way since we were teenagers. I was always the achiever, the focused one, the girl who color-coded her notebooks and had internships lined up before her junior year. Haley was different. The kind of different that stormed out of Thanksgiving dinners, that changed majors 3 times, that once shaved her head after a breakup and claimed she was finally liberated. But still, she was my sister. And even now, with our relationship frayed and delicate, I held out hope that tonight might just pass without incident. The first hour was smooth enough. My father beamed the entire time, sitting at the head of the long table beneath the canopy of soft lights, laughing with his old college friends and retelling stories that blurred the line between memory and myth. Plates clinked, glasses raised, and the whole yard echoed with a warm, nostalgic glow. Until dessert. I was in the middle of giving a short toast. I kept it simple. A few words about how Dad taught me the value of integrity, how he showed me what it meant to build something from the ground up. I mentioned my own business, Ignis Partners, and how his resilience inspired me during the toughest days of getting it off the ground. I was nervous, of course. Speaking in front of family is somehow harder than any corporate pitch. But they smiled, nodded, even teared up a little. Then Haley stood up. It wasn't dramatic at first, she just pushed her chair back and cleared her throat. But there was something in the way she held her wine glass, how her fingers trembled slightly, her jaw clenched too tight. My stomach turned before she even opened her mouth. "Oh, come on," she said loudly. "Can we stop pretending for 5 seconds?" A hush fell over the table. Someone dropped a fork. My father's brow furrowed. I looked at her, heart pounding. "Haley," I started, but she cut me off. "No," she snapped. "No, seriously. Let's stop pretending that everything's so perfect. That Brooke is some kind of self-made success story." She turned toward the rest of the family, her voice rising. "You all know she's been lying about her company, right? That it's basically just a front? She's been selling everyone this image, this idea that she built something real, but it's fake. All of it. Inflated numbers, fake clients, half the website doesn't even work if you look closely. It's just smoke and mirrors." My breath left my lungs in one sharp exhale. The ground didn't fall out from under me, but it felt like it might. There was silence. Then murmuring. My uncle cleared his throat. My mother's face went pale, eyes darting between us. My father opened his mouth, then closed it, looking suddenly much older than he had just minutes before. I felt everyone's eyes on me, weighing me, questioning me. I could see it already, the gears turning, the doubt creeping in. Because no matter how irrational the accusation, no matter how vicious the delivery, if you say it loudly enough, often enough, people start to wonder. I stood there, frozen, the warmth of the string lights suddenly feeling like heat from a spotlight. My fingers dug into the edge of my wine glass, so tight I thought it might shatter. And Haley? She just stood there, arms crossed, watching me like she'd won something. I wanted to scream. To throw the truth back in her face, that I'd spent the last 6 years grinding through 80-hour weeks, scraping together investors, surviving one near bankruptcy, and clawing my way out of it without help. That Ignis Partners wasn't just real, it was thriving. We had clients in 6 states. I had a team of 12. We were pulling in numbers that made me proud, even if the website hadn't been updated in a while. But I knew how it would sound. Defensive. Petty. Just another sisterly spat in the middle of what was supposed to be a celebration. So I said nothing. And maybe that was the worst part. Not the betrayal, not the humiliation, but the quiet that followed. The silence where no one came to my defense. Not right away. I sat down slowly, my toast unfinished, my face burning. Somewhere across the table someone coughed. The cake sat untouched. And Haley just smirked, like the fire she lit had been inevitable all along. After the party, after the tension and the whispering and the awkward goodbyes, I stayed behind to help clean up, even though I didn't say much to anyone. The string lights still flickered above the patio like nothing had happened, but inside, everything felt different. I moved robotically, folding tablecloths, stacking empty wine glasses, scraping untouched cake into the trash bin. I could hear my father talking quietly with my mother in the kitchen, the weight of the evening settling over the house like a storm that hadn't fully passed. I didn't ask what they were saying. I didn't need to. I drove home late that night, windows down to let in the cold air. It stung my cheeks and kept me awake, sharper than coffee, more honest than any conversation I could have had with Haley. That sting, real raw, matched how I felt. We've never been close, not in the way sisters are in stories or holiday commercials. We shared a last name and a hallway growing up, but that was where it ended. She was always restless, even as a kid. I remember how she would beg to change her room's color every 6 months. Lavender one season, navy the next. Nothing ever held her attention. There was always something new, something shinier she was chasing, even if it meant abandoning the last idea mid-flight. I was 12 when I first realized I couldn't rely on her. She had promised to help me decorate for Mom's surprise birthday dinner. I'd planned it for weeks, even saved my allowance to buy paper lanterns. But Haley forgot. Or maybe she just didn't care. She showed up 2 hours late with glitter in her hair and a lame excuse about getting caught up at the mall. That was the first time I finished something without her. It wasn't the last. Over the years, I watched her drift from one identity to the next. There was the vitamin business. Some multi-level marketing scam that left her with boxes of unopened supplements and unpaid credit card bills. Then came the influencer era. Haley posing in front of murals, hashtagging every post with hashtag girlbossenergy, chasing likes like they were currency. She posted photos with coffee cups she never drank and books she never read, preaching productivity while sleeping until noon. That lasted until the algorithm changed and her following dropped overnight. Then she was a freelance consultant, though I never figured out what she was consulting on. For a month, she called herself a creative strategist. Then she pivoted to freelance stylist, offering virtual wardrobe audits for people she never met. My mother paid for the website domain. My father helped with her taxes when the business, if you could even call it that, barely brought in anything. She lives at home. So, in the room next to the one we shared as kids, her walls now covered in mood boards and self-help quotes. She orders oat milk lattes on their tab, leaves laundry in the dryer for days, and speaks like the world has wronged her by not recognizing her potential. And yet, at family gatherings, she acts like she's discovered something the rest of us missed. The truth is, my parents let her. They cushion every fall, soften every failure. My mother still calls her my little dreamer, like she's 17 instead of 26. My father, despite everything, still hopes she'll land on something real, something that sticks. But I see it for what it is. Haley's greatest skill isn't in business or branding or content creation. It's in survival. She knows how to stay afloat on other people's lifeboats. She knows how to weaponize charm when needed, how to throw a tantrum just loud enough to distract from the silence of her own progress. And yet, despite everything, despite the truth that I have built something with real bones, real staff, real contracts, real growth, I never talk about it in front of her. Not because I'm ashamed, but because every time I've let even a little bit slip, I've seen the flicker in her eyes. That glint of envy she never names, never admits, but always wears like a second skin. Ignis Partners wasn't born in a burst of inspiration. It was 6 years of grit. I started it in a cramped co-working space with second-hand furniture and a laptop that overheated if I opened too many tabs. I pitched clients over Zoom calls in my pajamas, edited marketing decks at 3 in the morning, took meetings in parked cars because I didn't want anyone to know I didn't yet have an office. I hired my first intern after 18 months. Now I have 12 employees, a modest but steady monthly revenue, and contracts with brands that I once only dreamed of collaborating with. But I've never thrown that in Haley's face. I've never held her failures up against my work. Not publicly. Not in front of family. I don't need to. I've always believed the work speaks for itself. Apparently that silence, my refusal to flaunt, looked like weakness to her. Or maybe it just made her feel invisible. I don't know. What I do know is that night at Dad's party, when she stood up and accused me of running a fake company, it wasn't about facts. It wasn't about the website or the metrics or the supposed gaps she pointed out. It was about the ache she carries. The bitterness of feeling left behind. The resentment of watching someone else rise while you're still trying to climb out of the same place. He would never admit it. Not out loud. She would never say, I feel like I'm losing. But that's what it is. A competition she invented with rules only she follows. And I've been playing a different game entirely. One built on discipline, strategy, hard choices. One that costs me more than anyone knows. Sometimes I wonder if she even sees that. If she sees the toll. The friendships I let go, the relationships I never had time for, the anxiety I still carry about payroll and deadlines and investor expectations. Maybe in her mind success came easily to me. Maybe that's the story she tells herself to sleep at night. But I know the truth. And somewhere deep down so does she. The morning after the party I told myself I wouldn't dwell on it. I made coffee, opened my laptop like I always do and buried myself in emails and numbers, contracts and Slack messages. Work has always been my refuge. The clean structure of it, the logic, the progress. Measurable and real, unlike the chaos of family dynamics. But before noon my mother texted me a short message that knocked the breath out of my morning. Haley says she's coming over. Wants to talk things through. Just a heads up. No apology. No context. Just that. Didn't surprise me. Haley never lets things go. Not if she thinks there's a stage to reclaim, not if there's attention to be salvaged. I knew whatever this was, it wasn't going to be a quiet conversation or a reconciliation. That would have required reflection or remorse. Haley doesn't do remorse. She showed up just after lunch, uninvited, marching into my office like it was still her high school bedroom. She barely looked around. Didn't register the wall of white boards filled with projections and campaign outlines. Didn't glance at the awards stacked along the shelf, or the framed contracts, or the row of employee portraits we'd taken at last year's retreat. She sat down without asking, crossed her legs, tilted her chin up like she was the one who'd been wronged. So, she said, voice already loaded, are you ready to be honest or are we still playing pretend? I didn't answer right away. I watched her instead, the way her fingers tapped on the arm of the chair, too fast, too sharp like she was holding something in. I don't know what version of pretend you think this is, I said slowly. But I've been nothing but honest. You don't have to like me, Haley, but what you did last night. What I did, she interrupted, eyebrows arching, was give this family a reality check. You've been feeding them this polished fantasy for years, Brooke. And I'm done letting them applaud it. Ignis Partners is a real company, I said, my voice calm but unyielding. I can show you our tax returns. I file quarterly. I can pull up the LLC documentation, our licensing with the state, payroll records, client contracts. Everything. This isn't smoke and mirrors, Haley. It's all there in black and white. She scoffed. Loudly. A sound soaked in disbelief and disdain. Please, she said, waving a hand like she was swatting away a fly. You think I don't know how easy it is to fake that? You can download templates for those kinds of documents. Print them out, sign them yourself. A bunch of PDFs don't prove anything. Anyone with Photoshop and a little nerve can make a company look real on paper. I leaned back slowly in my chair, hands still, breath steady. I've dealt with hostile clients, resistant executives, even investors trying to bully their way into equity they hadn't earned. But nothing prepares you for being accused so baselessly, so viciously, by someone who shares your blood. You're seriously standing in my office, I said quietly, telling me that my business, the one I've spent 6 years building, isn't real because you don't understand it? She didn't flinch. I'm telling you, she said, voice low and deliberate, that your story doesn't add up. No one builds a company like this from scratch, not without help, not without cutting corners. And I'm done listening to your version of events. So I went out and got my own. My stomach tightened instinctively. I hired someone, she said. Actually a team. Private investigators. I blinked. They've been looking into you, she went on. Your company, your records, your online presence. They're going through everything. Clients' filings, digital trails, back-in-site data. Everything that doesn't quite add up? They'll find it. I didn't move. I didn't speak. The room suddenly felt too quiet. Even the hum of my laptop fan seemed distant. Haley leaned forward now, smiling, not warm, not triumphant, but something colder. They're on their way here, she said. Probably within the hour. I thought you'd like the chance to explain yourself before they present their findings. It felt surreal. I searched her face for some sign of a joke, of exaggeration, of drama for the sake of drama. But there was none. She believed this. Or at least she'd convinced herself she did. The hatred didn't come from logic. It came from resentment. From years of watching me move forward while she stayed in place. From hearing our father praise my work ethic while bailing her out of another failed scheme. From watching me build something she couldn't even define, let alone replicate. You really think this is the way? I asked finally. That dragging me through some paranoid crusade is going to get you what, exactly? Respect? Sympathy? A footnote in my story. No, she said. The truth. But that wasn't what she wanted. Not really. Haley didn't want the truth. She wanted vindication. She wanted to be right. Because being right, even about a lie, was better than sitting in the shadow of someone else's quiet success. I stood up slowly. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't plead or argue. Fine, I said. Let them come. If she wanted to tear through every file, every transaction, every email chain, I'd let her. I had nothing to hide. But I also knew this wasn't about evidence. This was about pain. Her pain. The kind that festered when comparison becomes obsession. She thought she could dismantle what I built by accusing, by interrogating, by dragging me into her spiral. But what she didn't understand is that truth doesn't flinch under pressure. It doesn't shake when the wind picks up. She thought she was lighting a fire. But I've lived in the flames for years. The moment Haley mentioned the private investigators, I felt the weight of confirmation settle in my chest like a stone. It didn't shock me, not really. I had known something was coming. I had known for weeks, if not months. It was in the tone of her voice during that strained phone call in October, when she casually asked if Ignis Partners ever worked with government clients. It was in the sudden uptick of strange traffic to our internal portal, the brief spike in login attempts from IPs traced to proxy servers. It was in the way she looked at me at brunch 2 weeks ago, like she knew something I didn't. But I did know. Beverly knew too. Beverly is my attorney, not just legally sharp but cold as steel when she needs to be. I told her months ago that I suspected Haley was fishing for something. Not in the obvious way, not in a way you could call out without sounding paranoid, but in that subtle, sneaky manner Haley has always perfected. Half smiles, veiled questions, fake curiosity wrapped in sisterly concern. And Caleb, my CTO, picked up on the technical end of it. 2.5 weeks ago he messaged me at midnight with a screenshot of failed login attempts to our backend system. The IP addresses were masked, bouncing off of servers in Europe and Canada, but the targeting was clear. Someone was trying to access proprietary client folders and they knew just enough to know where to look. We'd locked it down within hours. Caleb ran full diagnostics, installed enhanced monitoring and set up shadow alerts, triggers that would silently ping him if the same behavior repeated. It did. Twice. I asked Beverly to compile everything. Timestamps, network logs, screenshots, incident reports. Caleb pulled chat history, browser metadata, activity logs, and matched it against the times Haley had been near any of our physical or cloud systems. We had a file the size of a small novel. Because I know how this world works. I know that being right isn't enough. You need proof. You need to be so prepared, so undeniably organized that when someone tries to tear you down they hit steel instead of glass. So when she said those words, "They're on their way," I didn't panic. I didn't blink. I just smiled once, soft and slow, and told her to make herself comfortable. Then I stood and excused myself, saying something about needing to use the restroom. She barely nodded, already pulling out her phone like she was preparing to livestream the downfall she thought was coming. I stepped out of the office and moved quickly, but not too quickly. I walked down the hall, turned the corner and locked the door of the bathroom behind me. I took a breath, not because I was afraid but because I needed clarity. This was no longer a family spat or some dramatic outburst over a birthday dinner. This was an attack. Direct. Personal. And I was done playing nice. I pulled out my phone and opened the encrypted chat thread Beverly had set up for us weeks ago. It was named Orange, just as we'd agreed. One word. Vague. Easy to miss. I typed the code phrase we'd rehearsed. Just 2 words. Signal green. Not even 30 seconds later Beverly responded, "Acknowledged. Activating packet." That packet contained a timeline of every suspicious incident since August. Every falsified request, every phishing attempt. Every time Haley had asked questions that didn't align with casual curiosity. It included screenshots of her emails to old colleagues of mine, trying to verify employment details that weren't hers to ask about. It included testimony from 2 of my staffers who reported that she had approached them privately during visits to the office, trying to extract operational details under the guise of family interest. Caleb? He was already awake. I saw the blue dot appear beside his name the moment I hit send. "Confirming activity on Shell profile," he wrote. "Target location pinged. If they're bringing tech I'll see it." I knew what that meant. If Haley's private investigators were dumb enough to bring compromised hardware into my office, USB devices, sniffer tools, rogue laptops, Caleb would detect it before the handshake protocols even finished. He built our system like a fortress and now it was awake. This wasn't about proving myself anymore. This was about defending what I had built. I had fought for every inch of this company, every late night, every contract, every hard-earned win. Haley had no idea what it meant to actually build something. To bleed for it. She didn't understand loyalty, responsibility, the risk you carry when other people's paychecks depend on your decisions. She thought this was still about her and me. About childhood rivalries and unmet expectations. But she'd crossed a line. This was corporate sabotage. And I wasn't going to let it slide. I slipped the phone back into my pocket, smoothed my hair, checked my reflection in the mirror. My face looked calm. My eyes didn't. When I returned to the office, Haley was still scrolling on her phone, her expression smug and self-satisfied. She looked up when I entered, expecting nerves. Expecting fear. But I just smiled again. Not to provoke her. Not to reassure her. But because the countdown had begun. And I was ready. The knock at the door came sharp and precise. 2 quick raps followed by one more quieter like punctuation. Haley was already halfway to the entrance before I could stand. Her steps were quick, almost giddy, as if she had just won a contest no one else knew she was playing. She smoothed her dress, tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, and turned to me with a look that was equal parts triumph and condescension. "They're here," she said, and then opened the door. 2 men stood in the doorway. The first, tall and broad-shouldered, introduced himself as Mr. Langston. He wore a gray suit, slightly wrinkled from travel, and carried a heavy leather briefcase. The second, Agent Rhodes, was leaner, sharper in posture, and wore a badge clipped to his jacket that read Silverline Investigations. His expression was unreadable, calm, focused, the kind of face that gave nothing away. Together they looked like they belonged more in a courtroom or an FBI field office than in my Austin home office. Haley practically beamed as she stepped aside to let them in. She gestured to the chairs across from my desk like she owned the place. "Please have a seat," she said, her voice dripping with anticipation. "I'm sure you'll want to share your findings right away. We've all been waiting for the truth." I didn't say anything. I simply nodded politely at both men, then returned to my seat, hands resting calmly on the arms of my chair. My laptop was still open. The notification light blinked once. Caleb's silent confirmation that everything on our side was secure. Mr. Langston opened his briefcase with slow precision and pulled out a thick file. Agent Rhodes remained standing, holding a tablet in one hand, tapping something in as the room fell quiet. The energy shifted. The air grew heavy with expectation. Haley's eyes sparkled with it. She leaned forward, elbows on her knees, hungry for drama, for a scene. For my collapse. Instead, Mr. Langston cleared his throat and began. "Our agency was hired by Miss Haley Mitchell to conduct an in-depth background review of the business known as Ignis Partners, registered to Miss Brooke Mitchell." He paused and glanced over at me. I nodded again. "What we found," he continued, "was a legally incorporated, financially solvent, and operationally active business headquartered here in Austin, Texas. The entity has been in continuous operation for 6 years, holds a valid state license, and complies fully with all applicable business and tax regulations." Haley's smile faltered slightly, but she didn't speak. "Not yet." Mr. Langston turned a page in his file, reading without emotion. "Ignis Partners currently employs 11 full-time staff members, not including part-time contractors and interns. The company holds active contracts with 19 clients across 4 states, spanning industries including tech, healthcare, and nonprofit development. Gross revenue for the previous fiscal year exceeded $1.6 million. Quarterly tax returns match filed reports, and payroll documentation confirms employee compensation meets state and federal standards." He closed the folder gently. "In short," he said, meeting Haley's eyes now, "the business is legitimate, profitable, and well-managed." The silence that followed was so deep it hummed in my ears. Haley blinked. Her lips parted slightly, but no sound came out. Her hands, folded tightly in her lap, twitched once before she clasped them harder. Agent Rhodes finally spoke, his voice even, neutral. "We found no evidence of misrepresentation, fraud, or unethical conduct in the operations or public communications of Ignis Partners. Website content, financial documents, and third-party records all align with legal expectations. If your concern was that this company was a facade," he paused, then continued, "our investigation concludes otherwise." I watched her face shift in real time. The color drained slowly from her cheeks, replaced by a pale, confused stillness. Her eyes darted between the 2 investigators as if waiting for a different ending, as if they'd somehow misread their own report. But it was all there, printed and presented, irrefutable. From behind the door of the hallway, I could hear the muffled sounds of movement. My father's footsteps, the soft gasp of one of our aunts. Of course they had gathered nearby. Haley made sure everyone knew this moment was coming. He wanted an audience. He wanted an exposure. And she got one. Just not the kind she expected. She finally spoke, barely above a whisper. "There must be a mistake." Mr. Langston gave her a brief, professional nod. "We double-checked every lead you provided. There was no mistake." Haley didn't respond. She simply sat there, eyes wide, breathing shallowly, like someone trying to process an ending that didn't fit the script in her head. All her certainty, all her bravado had drained away in an instant. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. The silence said everything. I kept my posture still, my expression composed, but inside, there was a quiet roar of vindication. Not because I wanted revenge, but because the truth was finally visible to everyone in the room. Everyone who had ever doubted, questioned, whispered. The documents Haley had so confidently expected to condemn me had instead illuminated everything she refused to believe. It wasn't just validation. It was the end of her illusion. And I saw it break across her face like glass under pressure. The room remained still. Haley stared at the floor, eyes unfocused, mouth slightly open. Agent Rhodes put his tablet away. Mr. Langston returned the folder to his briefcase. Without another word, they stood. I followed them to the door, shook their hands, thanked them calmly. Behind me, she still hadn't moved. Just as I was about to close the door behind them, Mr. Langston turned back, his hand resting lightly on the frame. He didn't smile, didn't shift his tone, but there was a pause. Measured, deliberate. He looked at me, then glanced toward the hallway where Haley still sat frozen, and then finally spoke again, this time with the calm precision of someone about to change the temperature of the room. "One more thing," he said. "During the course of our investigation, we performed a routine security sweep of Ignis Partners' digital infrastructure, as is standard when investigating claims of corporate fraud or identity falsification." My fingers tensed around the doorknob, though my face didn't move. I said nothing, just held his gaze and waited. He continued. "We identified multiple unauthorized access attempts directed at your company servers, specifically targeting staff email credentials, back-end client documentation, and internal scheduling software. These attempts occurred over the past 3 months and were timed in clusters that correlate with known vulnerability windows: late nights, national holidays, and weekends." A quiet breath left my lungs. I already knew most of this. Caleb had documented it in excruciating detail. But hearing it from a third party, neutral, external, somehow made it heavier. More real. Langston reached into his case again, this time pulling a thinner folder, marked with a tab labeled breach log. He opened it and flipped to the middle. Agent Rhodes, silent until now, stepped forward beside him and took over. "We traced the source of these attempts through encrypted traffic logs and reverse DNS tracking," he said. "The IP address used in at least 6 of the breach attempts was registered to a residential network located in Westlake." He looked down briefly at his tablet, then back up. "Specifically, the home registered to Mr. Alan Mitchell. My father." For a moment there was no reaction. Just stillness, like a room holding its breath. Then slowly from behind us, a sound. Not from me. Not from the agents. It was Haley. A sharp inhale, a tiny stutter of movement, like her entire body flinched. I turned just enough to catch her expression. Her face was still pale, but now it was layered with something else. Something fragile, cracking at the edges. Her lips parted again, but she said nothing. Her hands were no longer folded. They were trembling in her lap. Agent Rhodes spoke again, his tone still devoid of judgment. "In addition to the source IP, we recovered evidence of phishing links embedded in emails sent to Ignis staff, sent from disposable addresses masked behind common newsletter formats. One of the successful login attempts, which lasted under 90 seconds, resulted in a breach of scheduling software and an attempted download of client appointment metadata." He raised his eyes to mine. Fortunately, the download failed due to firewall restrictions. But the attempt was logged and preserved. Mr. Langston flipped another page in the folder. The spyware used was custom compiled from open-source modules available on the dark web. The method was amateur but deliberate, likely downloaded and installed by someone with surface-level understanding of penetration tactics, but not enough to mask their tracks effectively. He paused, then turned the paper around to face me. "We also traced the payment method used to purchase the phishing domain and VPN masking service. It was charged to a card ending in 1842. I knew that number. Everyone in the family did. It was the emergency credit card my father gave Haley last year after she claimed she needed it for urgent car repairs. He had given it to her reluctantly, with the caveat that it was for emergencies only, and that she had to notify him before using it. She never gave the card back. The silence that followed wasn't the quiet of shock anymore. It was the silence of realization, of recognition, and of betrayal blooming in real time. I didn't look at her. Not right away. I just stared at the paper in Mr. Langston's hand, the black and white simplicity of the evidence, how clean it looked on the page compared to the mess unraveling in the room. Then I turned to her. She was already crying. Not loud. Not performative. It wasn't the kind of sobbing she used when she wanted sympathy. These tears were tight, clenched, fought back. Her throat worked like she was trying to speak but nothing came out. She looked at me, eyes wide, wet, terrified, not of me but of everything crashing down at once. Her mask had shattered. And for the first time in my life, I saw her not as my sister, not as my rival, not even as the constant saboteur she'd become, but as someone utterly unprepared for the consequences she had set in motion. My father entered the room slowly from the hallway. He didn't say a word either. But he saw the open file, the agents, the paper with his card number typed cleanly across the page. And then he looked at her. She whispered his name, barely audible. Dad. But he didn't respond. He didn't even move toward her. I felt nothing in that moment. No triumph. No justice. No revenge. Only cold clarity. Haley hadn't just tried to hurt me. She had compromised my business, violated federal security laws, exposed client data, and weaponized our family's trust in the process. This was never about sibling rivalry. This was never about proving she was better. It was about destruction. And now the truth was out. She shook her head slowly, as if denial alone could erase what had already been spoken aloud. Her mouth opened, closed, then opened again, but the words wouldn't form. Her voice finally broke through in a hoarse, cracking whisper. That's not true. I didn't. No, I wouldn't. But the room had already changed. The moment had already shifted. Agent Rhodes didn't flinch. He simply tapped something on his tablet and passed it to Mr. Langston, who turned it toward Haley and spoke with quiet finality. We also uncovered a pattern of outgoing calls placed from 2 prepaid numbers, both registered under false identities but linked by GPS pings to the same cell tower clusters in Westlake, Texas. The call logs match the contact numbers of 5 of your company's current clients. He didn't need to finish. I already knew what he was about to say. I had seen the flags in our client retention dashboard. 2 clients had gone uncharacteristically silent over the past month. Both had canceled check-ins last minute, and both had mentioned vague concerns about reputational clarity during our last exchange. It hadn't made sense at the time. It did now. Mr. Langston continued without pause, tone clinical, unyielding. The calls were made during business hours. Voicemail transcripts, provided voluntarily by 2 of your clients, reveal that the caller introduced herself as an independent journalist investigating ethical concerns related to Ignis Partners, and sought comment on the company's alleged misconduct and financial irregularities. He looked directly at Haley now. That voice was matched to yours through phonetic voiceprint analysis and metadata tags captured by one of the voicemail systems. You left your real name on 2 of those recordings. That alone, in addition to your use of a family IP in the linked financial transactions, is sufficient to establish a pattern of targeted, sustained interference. She blinked fast as if she could blink her way out of the accusation. No, she said. No, I was just trying to ask questions. I didn't say anything wrong, I never said I was anyone else. You misrepresented your identity, Rhodes cut in, voice flat. You posed as a journalist. You targeted business relationships with clear intent to erode trust and provoke reputational damage. That's not just morally reprehensible. It's legally actionable. Silence spread through the room like smoke, thick, suffocating, inescapable. No one spoke. No one moved. I didn't turn away from her. I couldn't. I looked straight at her as everything she had built around herself, her stories, her justifications, her games, finally collapsed. My mother stood in the hallway now, one hand on the wall as if she needed support. Her mouth was slightly open, her eyes darting from me to Haley and back again. Her expression wasn't shocked anymore. It was something deeper, something hollow. My father still hadn't said a word, but his face was gray with disbelief. The lines in his forehead seemed deeper than before. He stared at Haley like he didn't recognize the person in front of him. One by one, the others began to appear. Our uncle, who had come early to help with chairs, standing stiff in the doorway. Aunt Marion, who had always defended Haley as a creative spirit, now clutching a mug with both hands as if it could steady her. Cousins, friends of the family who had once shared birthday cakes with us in this very house. All of them now witnesses to something none of them had expected. No one said her name. No one came to her defense. Haley stood slowly, almost like her body had forgotten how. Her hands hovered in the air like she didn't know where to put them. She turned slightly toward our parents as if begging with her eyes, but they didn't move. My mother's fingers twitched near her mouth. My father looked down. I didn't mean for it to go this far, Haley said, her voice cracking. I wanted to understand. I thought maybe something was off. I didn't want to hurt anyone. You called my clients, I said quietly. My voice was calm but my jaw was locked. You used Dad's card to fund spyware. You tried to destroy everything I built because you couldn't stand watching me succeed. Her eyes flicked to mine. For a second they flared with something, shame maybe or rage or both. You think you're perfect, she hissed. You always have. You walk around like you're better than the rest of us. I just wanted to level the field. My throat tightened, but I didn't look away. You didn't want a level field. You wanted to see me fall. The words landed. Not just for her. For everyone. And still no one spoke for her. Not one voice came to fill the space around her. She was standing in the middle of a room full of people who had once held her, supported her, made excuses for her. But now all she had left was silence and consequences. Her eyes moved from face to face, waiting for someone to soften, to offer her a way out. But the truth was laid bare. She had crossed a line no apology could unmake. And I felt the moment the bond broke completely. The thread that had held us together, frayed for years, thinned by resentment, finally snapped under the weight of what she'd done. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a choice. A choice she made again and again, each time she picked sabotage over honesty, jealousy over grace, destruction over effort. The silence in the room deepened, not just heavy but final. She stood there suddenly small. And I realized with terrifying clarity that I no longer saw her as my sister. I saw her as someone I used to know. The sound of the sirens didn't come with flashing lights or drama, just the distant, approaching hum of something inevitable. When the officers stepped through the front door, guided quietly by Agent Rhodes, everything inside the house froze. My mother covered her mouth. My father straightened slowly, his face like stone, his hands clenched at his sides. No one moved. No one spoke. Haley stood in the middle of the room, her arms slightly lifted, as if caught in the act of trying to explain herself to no one in particular. Her eyes darted toward the door, then to me, then to the two uniformed officers who now stood at either side of her. She took a step back, the air around her shifting. Wait, she stammered, lifting her hands as if trying to slow time. This isn't necessary. Please. I didn't mean for this to happen. Her voice cracked under its own weight. I wasn't trying to hurt anyone, she said, louder now, pleading. I swear I thought maybe something was wrong and I had to look into it. I had to make sure. It was for the family. I did this for the family. The officers didn't respond. One of them, a woman with sharp eyes and a calm face, moved closer with practiced efficiency. The other stayed near the door watching the room. Haley turned toward our parents, her voice desperate now, messy and uneven. Dad, please, you know me. He gave me the card. I didn't think it would go this far. Please say something. But he didn't. He just stared at her, his expression hollow, distant, like he was looking at someone who'd vanished years ago and left only this version behind. My mother's shoulders were shaking but no sound came out. She wouldn't meet Haley's eyes. I didn't want to ruin her life, Haley tried again, gesturing in my direction. I wanted to stop the lies. I thought she was hiding something. You have to understand that. Please, I didn't want this. You installed spyware, one of the officers said, her voice even but firm. You impersonated a member of the press, falsified intent, and made multiple attempts to breach private business systems. You're being charged with attempted cyber intrusion, identity misrepresentation, and unlawful surveillance. No, Haley whispered, her voice dissolving. Please don't do this. Her hands were trembling now as the officer gently, but without hesitation, guided her arms behind her back. The sound of the handcuffs was quiet, almost soft, but it echoed like a crack through the house. Haley gasped, her breath short and sharp. I didn't mean to, she said again. I didn't want this. Brooke, please say something. Everyone was still. Every face in the room was turned toward her, but none moved. There was no more anger. No more shouting. Only disbelief. Only silence. I stepped forward not because I wanted to, but because I needed to say it. She turned her face toward me, tear-streaked and pleading, her wrists bound in cold steel. And I said quietly, simply, you did this yourself. Her eyes widened, and for the briefest second I saw something collapse behind them. Not pride, not resistance, but the final realization that there was no one left to blame. The officers led her out the door. No one followed. The house was silent after they took her. Still but not peaceful. The kind of stillness that comes when something irreversible has just happened and no one knows what to do with the space it leaves behind. I stood in the center of it, my hands at my sides, my jaw clenched, trying not to let the exhaustion reach my face. Then I heard my mother's voice, low but sharp enough to cut through the quiet. You didn't have to let it go that far. I turned toward her slowly. Her hands were gripping the edge of the kitchen counter, knuckles white, shoulders trembling, not from sadness, not fully, but from something else. Accusation. You could have stopped this, she said louder now, her voice shaking. She's your sister. You should have found another way. There was. The moment I always knew would come. The moment she'd find a way to make Haley the victim no matter how far things had gone. The moment she would look past what had been done to me and only see what had been done to Haley. She didn't mean it like that, my mother said. You know how she is. He gets emotional. He spirals. You've always known how she is. Yes, I said. I do. Her eyes snapped to mine. Then why didn't you just talk to her? Why did it have to end with police at the door and handcuffs? She's your sister, Brooke. Family should come first. I felt something rise in my chest. Something old and sharp and tired. And I didn't swallow it this time. Family should have come first when she was trying to destroy mine, I said, my voice level but steady. Family should have mattered when she spoofed my company email addresses and tried to trick my clients into leaking information. Family should have mattered when she planted spyware on systems I've spent 6 years building. Where was all this concern for family when she was calling people behind my back, pretending to be a journalist just to spread doubt and sabotage my work? My mother flinched, but I didn't stop. You think I didn't try to stop it? I saw the signs. I told her, quietly. I warned her. I didn't humiliate her. I didn't retaliate. I gave her every chance to step back before it got to this. And every time she made another choice. A worse one. My voice was tight now, the words scraping from somewhere deeper than my throat. She didn't just hurt me, Mom. She put other people's jobs at risk. She made clients question my integrity. She violated federal law. And all because she couldn't stand not being the center of attention. Because her ego couldn't survive in a world where I succeeded. You don't understand, she said weakly. She's been struggling. No, I said louder. I have been struggling. I just didn't make it everyone else's problem. You've let her chaos shape every room we've ever stood in, and every time she burned something down, you called it a phase or a cry for help. But what about me? What about all the times I had to swallow it, make space for it, and pretend it didn't matter? Tears filled her eyes now, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. Not this time. I needed you, I said. Not to fix it, not to take sides, but to see it. To see me. To notice when I was working myself into the ground to keep this company alive. When I was dealing with investors who barely respected me or clients who tested my limits. I needed you to tell her enough, before she took it too far. But you didn't. You never do. Because Haley is the loud one. The fragile one. And I'm the one you all expect to just keep going no matter what. My mother's face crumpled, but she said nothing. She just looked at me, like she was seeing me for the first time and didn't know where I had come from. I took a breath, my chest tight but clear. She did this herself, I said softer now but without an ounce of doubt. And if you're going to keep pretending that I was the one who broke this family, then you're not seeing what's actually broken. I didn't wait for her reply. For once I didn't need one. It had been almost 3 weeks since that day in the living room. The day the silence fell like a curtain between the past and whatever came after. I hadn't seen Haley since. The house had gone still again, our parents barely speaking to each other, my father moving quietly through rooms as if trying to live around the memory of what had happened. My mother called once or twice but I let it go to voicemail. I wasn't ready to hear her voice, not yet. Not after what she said. I buried myself in work. I thought maybe if I focused hard enough, stayed late enough, kept the calendar full, I could outrun the weight of it. But on a Tuesday afternoon, just as I was finishing a client strategy review, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Then a voicemail from a detective at the precinct downtown. Calm, brief, professional. They had more information related to the case. I was needed for a statement. It wouldn't take long. I didn't ask what it was. I just got in my car, drove through the flat light of a pale November sky, and parked behind the precinct building where everything felt gray and too quiet. Detective Harrow met me at the front desk. I'd seen her before. She'd been present during the initial review of digital evidence. Concise and composed in that way detectives often are when they've seen too much. She greeted me with a nod, then led me through a hallway into a private office, where a folder waited on the desk like a sealed verdict. We've continued reviewing the contents of the seized devices, she said, flipping the folder open without waiting for a response. That includes a second phone, registered under a false name, but identified through behavioral match to your sister. I stayed standing. She slid a few printed pages across the desk. Screenshots, blurred backgrounds, black text bubbles, familiar contact names. Haley's voice, but stripped of performance. No exclamations, no emojis, just the brutal precision of someone writing from the center of obsession. She kept records, the detective said. Text logs, group threads, even notes to self stored in encrypted vaults. We decrypted most of it through legal tools and key recovery. I looked down. My stomach turned as my eyes traced the first lines. Brooke's not smarter. She's just quieter. That's why they think she's winning. Everything she has was luck and lies. I know she's hiding something. I can feel it. If I can't find anything real, I'll make something stick. It'll be her word against mine. And then the one that didn't need interpretation, didn't leave room for misunderstanding. I either find something or I make it up, I don't care how. She doesn't get to win. I'm going to destroy her. That line sat on the page like it was still hot. I didn't speak. I didn't move. I just felt it hit, hard and slow, like something cracking beneath my ribs. Because part of me had always hoped it wasn't really that deep. That maybe she'd acted out of impulse, out of desperation or confusion or pain. That there had been something left in her that's still tethered to us, to me. But this was deliberate. This was a plan. She'd written it, typed it with her own fingers. She had admitted the intent not just to expose but to invent. To fabricate, to twist, to ruin. It wasn't jealousy anymore. It wasn't rivalry. It was malice. The detective kept talking, calmly explaining the process. How this evidence would supplement the charges already filed. How the DA's office was preparing for a broader case. How communications of this nature proved mens rea, criminal intent. But her voice faded behind the ringing in my ears. I looked again at the messages. I thought about all the years we spent in the same house, eating the same dinners, posing in the same family photos. I thought about the nights I'd helped her fix her resume, the times I'd stayed silent just to keep the peace. I thought about the voice she used whenever she needed something, soft, childlike, rehearsed. And how that voice never matched what I was reading now. I don't remember sitting down, but I did. My hand stayed still on my lap. I didn't cry. Not then. I didn't have it in me. She meant it, I said quietly. Detective Harrow nodded. Yes. She did. That was all. That was everything. I sat in the courtroom with my hands folded in my lap, staring straight ahead, my spine locked into the stiff chair like I was bracing for a wave I'd known was coming. The walls were beige, the air recycled and flat, and yet everything felt heavier than air should be. Haley sat across the room at the defense table, wearing a navy suit jacket that was too big for her hair pinned back in a way that looked carefully disheveled, the kind of styling meant to say she wasn't herself anymore, just a scared, small version of who she used to be. The courtroom was only half full. My parents were there. My father sitting stiff and silent at the back, my mother beside him, clutching a tissue she hadn't used but held like a prop. A few reporters sat in the gallery, heads bowed over notepads, and behind them one of my employees, Julia, had come to show quiet support. I hadn't asked her to, but she came anyway. I didn't look back at her. I didn't want anyone to see the conflict on my face. Haley's defense was thin but loud. Her lawyer leaned hard into emotion, portraying her as a woman unraveling under the weight of family pressure, mental instability, and a deep need for approval that she never received. She had, they said, simply reached a breaking point. She'd acted out of fear, not malice. Out of confusion, not intent. But the messages were printed, bound, and submitted. So were the digital forensics. So were the recorded voicemails to my clients, the chat logs recovered from deleted folders, the timeline of breach attempts traced back to her devices and Wi-Fi at my parents' home. Intent wasn't a matter of speculation, it was built, day by day, with her own hands. The prosecution didn't waste time. They outlined her actions plainly. A sustained campaign of intrusion, manipulation, and identity fraud with a clear target, me, and a singular goal: to dismantle my company from the inside. They showed how her behavior was methodical, calculated, and sustained over months, not a rash, impulsive act from someone overwhelmed. And then they read aloud the message that changed everything. I either find something or I make it up, I don't care how. She doesn't get to win. I'm going to destroy her. The room went still when those words hit the air. No one moved. Even her lawyer stopped flipping notes. When it was my turn to speak, I didn't say much. I didn't need to. The facts had already done the work. I stood up, my voice even, my words steady. She didn't just try to damage a company, I said. She tried to undo 6 years of my life, my livelihood, and the livelihoods of people who trust me with their careers. She tried to destroy trust, reputation, contracts, relationships. This wasn't an accident. It wasn't a cry for help. It was a decision. And she made it over and over. I didn't look at Haley when I spoke. I didn't look at my mother either. I kept my eyes on the judge. When the verdict was read, Haley didn't cry. She sat very still, her expression unreadable. The judge spoke clearly, almost gently, but without hesitation. 18 months in state custody. A minimum of 9 without parole consideration. Plus $80,000 in restitution for damages to Ignis partners, to be paid in scheduled increments over the next 5 years. No one gasped. There were no outbursts. Just that same thick quiet that had followed us for months. When the bailiff stepped forward to take her into custody, Haley finally turned toward me. Her face wasn't twisted in rage or panic this time. It was just blank. Hollow. Like the realization had arrived too late. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I simply stood and walked out of the courtroom, leaving behind the version of us that could no longer exist. The weeks after the sentencing were stranger than the trial itself. Life didn't stop or slow. It simply shifted quietly, relentlessly. Haley was gone, held somewhere I didn't ask about, in a space I couldn't picture, living a version of her life she'd written for herself. But the absence didn't feel like relief. It felt like something hollow and suspended. A silence that had finally taken shape. The family, as expected, reacted in layers. Some offered nothing but strained politeness. Others, mostly the older ones, the ones who'd always spoken in terms of keeping the peace, pulled away entirely. My mother stopped calling. I heard from my father once, a short message left on a Sunday night that said he hoped I was well and that he didn't know how everything had come to this. I didn't return the call. Not because I was angry anymore. Because I didn't know what to say to a man who had watched everything unravel and never stepped forward. And still the whispers came. That I could have dropped the charges. That I should have handled it privately. That sisters don't let each other fall no matter what the cost. One aunt told me at a family gathering that the punishment seemed excessive, her voice low but sharp, as if it had been me who handed down the sentence, not the state. But Ethan never flinched. He was the only one who reached out without obligation, without guilt behind his voice. He stopped by the office, unannounced, just to bring coffee and tell me I didn't owe anyone anything for doing the right thing. That people confuse loyalty with silence, and that silence isn't strength, it's complicity. He said Haley made her choices and everyone else just didn't want to look closely enough to admit it. He hugged me before he left, didn't make it awkward, and never brought it up again. At Ignis, the world kept turning. The weeks that followed became some of our busiest. 3 new clients signed that quarter. One of our proposals, an outreach campaign for a national sustainability nonprofit, was accepted with a budget nearly double what we projected. The team expanded. We took over a second floor in our downtown building, and Caleb finally got the server room he'd been asking for since year 2. I worked harder than I ever had, but differently now. Lighter. Not because the grief was gone, because it wasn't, but because the doubt was. That subtle, creeping feeling that I had to constantly defend my place, my decisions, my progress. It was gone. And without it, I could finally move freely. Not apologetically. Not cautiously. Just forward. I didn't think much about Haley after that. Not out of cruelty, just survival. The space she had once filled in my thoughts became smaller. Distant. Tucked away somewhere behind everything else I now had to hold. Until the letter came. It arrived in an envelope with no return address, handwritten, my name spelled in the loopy cursive she'd always used for cards and thank you notes. The kind that looked like a child's writing even as we aged. I didn't open it right away. For a full day it sat on the corner of my desk next to a binder of onboarding paperwork for new hires. I kept glancing at it, but I never touched it. When the day ended, I slipped it into the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet where I keep old things. Letters from past clients, notes from conferences, a photograph of the first Ignis team huddled around a plastic table with paper coffee cups. It's still there now. Unopened. Because I don't need to read it to know what it says. I can already hear the apology, already imagine the shape of the regret, the way it's been folded to fit inside a story she's finally ready to tell. But I'm not ready to hold that version of her again. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's closing the door without locking it, and still choosing not to open it. And I have a company to run. A life to live. A self I had to rebuild from beneath everything she tried to break. So I keep the letter. But I don't read it. That's the line now. And for once I don't cross it. It was a Tuesday, a quiet one, which is rare in the business I've built. Most days are noise, emails, strategy calls, deadlines layered on top of each other. But this one had a softness to it. I remember the way the light hit the windows, pale and gold, and the way the new intern spilled her coffee and laughed instead of panicking. A rare kind of calm. Then my assistant knocked once on my door and opened it gently, a strange look on her face, half cautious, half uncertain. She didn't say anything at first, just stepped aside. And he was standing there. My father. He looked older than I remembered. Not just in the natural way a year changes a person, but in the weight he carried in his posture. His shoulders had fallen inward, as if something he'd held upright for too long had finally collapsed. His jacket was the same brown one he used to wear to neighborhood events, slightly wrinkled, but still too formal for the setting. He had never been inside my office before. Not once in 6 years. I stood up, unsure what part of me was moving. Habit, reflex, muscle memory. We didn't speak right away. He stepped inside, gently closed the door behind him, and looked around like he was trying to memorize the shape of the space. You did all this? He said finally, his voice quieter than I expected. I nodded. Yes. Every piece of it. He looked at the wall where our first national campaign poster hung. Then at the map with pins showing our client cities. Then at the long whiteboard, covered in projections for next quarter. His eyes didn't rest in one place for long. When he finally looked at me, it was like he was seeing something he'd only known from a distance. "I owe you an apology," he said. Just that. No hesitation. A long one. I didn't move. I didn't respond. I just let him speak. "We didn't see you," he went on. "Not clearly. We saw what you were doing, but we didn't really see you. You didn't ask for attention the way Haley did. You didn't shout when you needed support." Giz kept going. "So we assumed you didn't need anything." He looked down at his hands. "That was a mistake. A failure, honestly. Of mine. I should have told you sooner. I should have said I was proud of you years ago." I watched him carefully, not for performance but for sincerity. And it was there. In the uneven breath, in the pause between sentences, in the way his hands curled just slightly at his sides. "I thought I was being fair," he added. "Trying to keep peace between the two of you. But I wasn't neutral. I was absent. And I let your mother speak for both of us more times than I should have. That wasn't fair to you." He finally stopped, looked at me again. Not with pity, not with expectation, but something else. Something that felt like truth. "I don't know if it means anything now," he said. "But I am proud of you. So proud it hurts if I'm honest. You built something solid while we were all too distracted to recognize it." I didn't cry. Thought I might. But instead I exhaled long and low, like I'd been holding my breath for a year and didn't even realize it. It wasn't absolution. It wasn't healing all at once. My mother still hadn't spoken to me since the trial. She still sent birthday cards signed only with her name, short, without warmth. I knew where she stood. And part of me had accepted it. But this was something. A shift. A beginning. "I don't need perfect," I said finally, voice quiet. "I just needed someone to see what it cost me." He nodded, eyes damp now, but he didn't try to close the distance between us. He didn't reach out. And I was grateful for that. He just stood there in the middle of the office I built from the ground up, and I let him be there. Let him witness it. For the first time in years, something in my chest loosened. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But relief. And it felt like something I could carry forward. The city looked different at night. Or maybe I did. I stood on the balcony of my new apartment high above downtown Austin, one hand wrapped around a glass of water that had long since gone warm, and the other resting lightly on the railing. Below me the lights moved, cars in motion, windows glowing, people living lives that had nothing to do with mine. There was something comforting in that. Something steady. It had been 2 years. 2 exact years since the courtroom, since the evidence, since the silence that fell when truth was finally louder than chaos. 2 years since the knock on my office door, since the courtroom lights, since the words I never thought I'd hear from my father. The air was cool, sharp with the scent of wet concrete and faint jasmine. From this height, the noise of the city melted into a low hum. The kind of quiet that felt earned. Behind me, Ignis Partners was still humming with life. Not the same office it used to be. Not the cramped little shared space with peeling paint and rattling vents. But a suite of floors in a downtown building that now held 34 employees full-time. 3 offices. Austin, Denver, and Raleigh. National contracts. International interest. Clients I used to pitch to in cold emails now asked me for time. There was a wall in our conference room covered in framed client campaigns. Each one marked a year, a milestone. I walked past that wall every morning. Sometimes I barely glanced at it. Other days I stopped for a second longer, not to admire but just to remind myself what it took to get here. And it took everything. Haley had tried to expose me. Tried to drag my name, my work, and everything I built through mud laced with malice. She wanted to pull off the curtain and reveal something empty, something performative, something fake. He said I was pretending. That I was only pretending. But the only thing her storm uncovered was herself. She tried to find my weakness, and all she found was her own breaking point. I never wanted revenge. I didn't need to watch her punished to feel whole again. What I needed, what I got, was the truth in full daylight, in official documents, in her own words written carelessly across encrypted messages she thought no one would see. She thought she could break me. But I didn't break. I grew. I let myself grieve. I let the hurt sit where it needed to. I let the confusion and the betrayal pass through me instead of calcify inside me. I learned to speak harder truths without shrinking. I stopped explaining myself to people who never cared to listen in the first place. I stopped making space for the versions of family that only existed when I stayed quiet. And tonight, standing in the cool breath of November wind, above the city that had watched me rise and almost fall, I let the weight of the past sit beside me, not heavy, not sharp. Just there. I had changed. And I wasn't afraid of being seen anymore. I finished the water, set the glass down and stood a little straighter. Whatever she tried to do, she failed. Because I didn't just survive it. I built something through it. And I'll keep building.